said, his voice steady and full of hope. "We're ready for it. The fog might roll in again. The Atlantic might turn violent. But as long as they had the trail, the dog, and the love that bound them together, the shadows would never win." The end. Shadows over the Atlantic. A novelization based on Hudson and Rex. Prologue. The salt in the wound. The fog in Street John's didn't just roll in. It breathed. It was a living, shivering thing that clung to the brightly colored houses of Jellybean Row, turning the vibrant reds and yellows into muted, ghostly echoes. For Detective Mark Hudson, the fog was a familiar companion, much like the rhythmic clicking of Rex's claws on the hardwood floor of his home. But tonight, the air felt different. It tasted of salt and impending sorrow. Mark stood by the window, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. Beside him, Rex, the German shepherd, whose amber eyes saw more than most humans, let out a low, vibrating huff. He sensed it too, the shift in the wind, the way the city held its breath before a scream. In this town, secrets didn't stay buried. They were washed up by the tide, or they were dragged into the light by those who had nothing left to lose. Chapter 1. The Silent Witness. The morning began with a disappearance that felt like a tear in the fabric of the community. Emma Jansson stood on the sidewalk of a quiet residential street, her breath hitching in her throat. To most, a 12-year-old missing for an hour might cause worry. For Emma, whose son lived in the beautiful, complex world of autism, it was a descent into a living nightmare. Brian didn't speak. He communicated through the intricate, photographic drawings he made with colored pencils, drawings that captured the world with a precision that was almost haunting. "He was right here," Emma sobbed, as Mark Hudson knelt before her, Rex standing vigilantly by his side. "He was drawing on the sidewalk. I just went inside for a second, Mark. Just a second." Mark reached out, his hand hovering near her shoulder before he offered a comforting squeeze. "We'll find him, Emma. Rex has the scent. He won't stop until Brian is safe." Rex was already moving. His nose was pressed to the concrete, snuffling at the chalky residue of Brian's last sketch. It was a drawing of a woman with long, chestnut hair and a professional air. "That's Megan Schaefer," Sarah Trong said, walking up behind them. The forensic specialist's voice was steady, but Mark caught the flicker of concern in her dark eyes. They had worked together long enough for Mark to read the subtitles of her silence. "She's a lawyer at Wilkins Law." $2 million, Mark muttered, looking at the drawing. Brian didn't just wander off. He saw her being taken. The investigation led them to the high-stakes corridors of Wilkins Law, a place where justice was a commodity and loyalty was often sold to the highest bidder. Megan's office was a shrine to order, but her life was in shambles. Her recent breakup with Jamie Bregman, a fellow lawyer, had been the talk of the firm. Mark found Jamie in a cramped apartment, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking as he clutched a glass of amber liquid. "I didn't do it, Jamie." Megan's voice seemed to echo through the papers strewn across his desk. "How many times do I have to tell you?" Jamie yelled at the empty air before realizing Mark was standing in the doorway. "She left me, detective. She said I was irregular, that I was touching accounts I shouldn't have. Did you kidnap her to silence her, Jamie?" Mark's voice was like ice. "I loved her." While Mark pushed for answers, Rex was doing what no human could. Back at the station, Brian had been found, huddled in a park, terrified and retreated into himself. He wouldn't look at Mark. He wouldn't look at his mother. But when Rex walked into the room, the dog didn't bark. He didn't demand attention. He simply walked over and laid his heavy head on Brian's knee. In the silence of the room, Sarah watched from the doorway, her heart aching. She saw the way Mark looked at the boy with a tenderness he rarely showed the world. It was in these moments, watching Mark's empathy, that Sarah felt the familiar, dangerous pull toward him. It wasn't just the thrill of the chase or the shared danger. It was the man underneath the badge. Brian's hand, trembling, reached out and buried itself in Rex's thick fur. For the first time that day, the boy's eyes cleared. He grabbed a pencil and began to draw. He didn't draw Jamie. He drew a man with a sharp jaw and a cold, calculating gaze. "That's not Jamie," Sarah whispered, leaning over the sketch. "That's someone else." The realization hit Mark like a physical blow. They were chasing a ghost, while the real monster was hiding in plain sight. Chapter 2. The Price of Redemption. The ransom drop was set for the Forest Road Cemetery, a place of granite crosses and weeping willows. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the irony of life being traded among the dead. Mark had devised a plan. They couldn't mark the money with ink. The kidnapper was too smart for that. Instead, Sarah had treated the bills with a synthetic scent, a pseudo-cocaine powder, undetectable to humans, but a beacon for Rex's superior nose. As Megan's father dropped the bag and walked away, a teenager emerged from the shadows, snatched the bag, and ran. "Go, Rex," Mark shouted. The chase was a blur of adrenaline. Rex leaped over low walls, his muscles rippling under his coat. They caught the kid, a gamer named Elroy who had been recruited through an anonymous chat, but the money and the real kidnapper were gone. The trail led back to a name they hadn't expected. Todd, the head of the law firm. "He's a lawyer." "Mark," Sarah cautioned, as they sat in the cruiser, the neon lights of the city reflecting in the rain-slicked windshield. "He knows the law better than we do. He's framed Jamie perfectly." "Jamie is dead, Sarah," Mark said quietly. He had just received the call. Jamie Bregman had been found in a rental van. His life ended by a single, professional stab wound. Todd didn't just want the money. He wanted a scapegoat. He used Earl Blackburn, a former client with a grudge, to do the dirty work. The climax happened in an abandoned machine shop in the area known as the Golds. The air was filled with the smell of grease and old metal. Mark and Rex moved through the shadows. A silent, deadly team. Todd stood over Megan, a gun in his hand, his face a mask of aristocratic entitlement. "She found the irregularities, Detective. She was going to ruin everything. $2 million was a small price for her parents to pay, for her life and for my silence." "Drop it, Todd," Mark commanded, stepping into the light. Todd sneered. "Blackburn is gone. You have no witnesses." "I have Brian," Mark said. "And I have Rex." At that moment, Rex lunged, not to kill, but to distract. The split second was all Mark needed. He tackled Todd, the gun skittering across the floor. Megan was shaking, her eyes wide with terror, but she was alive. Later, as the sun began to peek over the Atlantic horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, Mark stood by the ambulance as Megan was loaded in. Sarah approached him, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders against the morning chill. "You did good, Mark," she said, her voice soft. Mark looked at her, the exhaustion finally catching up to him. He looked at Rex, who was sitting by Brian, the boy finally smiling as he petted the dog. "We did good," Mark corrected. He reached out, his fingers brushing against Sarah's arm. The contact lasted only a second, but the heat of it lingered long after she walked away. Chapter 3. The Ghost on the Yacht. Peace was a fleeting visitor in Street John's. A week later, the call came from the marina. A luxury yacht, the best kind, was the scene of a murder that looked like something out of a twisted Greek myth. Jacob Kaufman, a tech mogul with more money than manners, had been found pinned to his cabin wall by a spear gun. He was a difficult man, the captain, Michel Soroco, told Mark as they stood on the deck. The wind was whipping her dark hair, her eyes hard and unsentimental. "He insulted my crew, he belittled his wife, and he treated his partner like a servant. There's a long list of people who wanted him dead." Mark looked at the victim. Kaufman was still wearing a distinctive, mahogany-cased watch, or rather, the case was there, but the watch was gone. "Sentimental value?" Mark asked. "Hardly," Sarah said, joining him. She was wearing her forensic coveralls, her face set in concentration. "Andrea, the wife, says it was a reproduction, a fake. But he never took it off." Rex was pacing the deck, his ears pinned back. He stopped at the stern, barking at the water. "What is it, pal?" Mark asked. "I checked the surveillance," Jesse, the team's tech expert, said over the comms. "Something disturbed the water about 15 minutes before the body was found. Someone didn't come through the docks. They came through the Atlantic." The investigation took a romantic, darker turn. Mark discovered that Kaufman's